Good morning, everyone. It's really good to be with you all. Thank you all for being here. And as Nathan said, I hope we have a nice time today. So what we want to do right now is we want to kind of get us set up. We want to talk about what we're going to do, and we want to give a little bit of background about why we're going to do it. And but the first thing I want to mention is what we're going to be doing today is missiology. We're going to do missiology together. We're going to think about missiology together. And when I say that word, there are some people in here that are just like, "Oh yes, I'm excited," because you've got a head for that kind of thing. You love to study, you love to read. It's right up your alley. Some others of you may be like, "What did he just say? What is that word? I'm a missionary. I don't do these ology words," and and that and honestly, we hope this event is satisfying for both groups, but it's not going to be fully satisfying for either group because we're trying to hit something in between that is thoughtful and engages your minds, but is not just totally like up in the clouds and has no real engagement with real life. So that's our goal. Whether we do it or not, that's really up to you. So I hope you guys don't let us down. Same thing. If you get bored today, it's on you. But except for right now. If you feel bored right now, you can blame me. After this, it's on you guys. When we talk about missiology, there's a few things I want to say just to get us started. First of all, I mentioned this yesterday, but missiology is something that we all do, but it's not necessarily something we spend very much time talking about or really have good forums to talk about. And so JEMA has the opportunity to present a really helpful space where we can ask questions and wrestle with issues together in a really collegial, encouraging way. And that's exactly what we hope we can do today. Missiology is often determined to some degree by our sending organizations, if you have a sending organization, and it's usually front-loaded. It's usually you get all your missiology training before you come to Japan, if you're not already from Japan. And what's crazy is after you get here for a little while, you realize some of your ideas about things actually change. And some of the things that you learned you were supposed to do don't necessarily work the way that you thought that they would work. So we're really hopeful by facilitating conversations, like we can continue learning together. We do think in the process of this that all of us are a lot wiser than any of us. And so the goal is not really to point out like, oh, this one person has figured it out on this particular topic. We don't know that. We really just want to discuss a topic that we've heard being raised by Japanese Christian leaders and see where we get from there. Another thing is that Japan has a long history of missions that's often forgotten. And it's especially forgotten, or it's just not known about, especially by newer missionaries. A lot of people are drawn to Japan because of the unreachedness of Japan. That's the highlight. And can kind of forget that there are, just in this room, decades and decades of missions experience. And then if you want to spread it out, there's, over a century of Protestant missions experience. If you want to spread it out even further than that, there's a few centuries of Christian mission that has taken place in Japan. And so we really need wisdom from those who have it. And those who are younger, you probably don't have as much of it. You might just, be like kind of a naturally wise person or have experiences that made you wise in other settings. But in terms of ministry in Japan, you're still new, and that's really good. And we have some people who have been serving for a long time, and you have a lot of wisdom, and we really hope that this is an opportunity where you can share that. At the same time, Japan is also constantly changing, and Nathan yesterday mentioned just the attraction to the new. There's so much newness all around us all the time. And the reality is that we also need fresh insights, and those usually come better from fresh eyes. People who are asking questions in different ways or seeing things for the first time that some of us have just come to take for granted because we've been here for a long time. So what that means practically is you guys still have time to move your tables. And if you're looking at the table and you're like, the people I'm sitting with are basically all my age or all exactly like me, you may want to consider shifting around a little bit. That's completely fine. There no offense in that. The other thing about tables is I'd recommend trying to get 4 to 5 people if you can at the table. 3 is okay. 2 is probably too few. And more than 5 is going to be too many. So 4 is like this sweet spot, but anything in that kind of wheelhouse. So we'll do a transition in a second. And actually, let's just do that now. If you want to move tables, go ahead and move tables right now. Okay, as we're getting settled, I'm going to have Steve Manders from OMF come up, and Steve's been part of our team that's been putting this together. He's going to describe a little bit about our format today and some of the discussion questions that we're going to be using.
Okay, thank you, Brett. So today, our aim for today is simply to get us talking, preferably to each other. And this is how it's going to work. So it'll be either a presentation or a panel. I mean, there's a couple of sessions across the day. And once we've done that, there'll be a question and answer time. And then we'll dive into table discussions. We have prepared some prompt questions. Please do not feel bound at all by these questions. They will appear on the screen at the appropriate time. But just in case you're not quite sure where to start, that's a good place to start. Otherwise, just respond essentially to what you've heard, what the different things that you've been hearing and different people have been talking. Essentially, again, our aim is to get us to talking to each other, and hopefully you will go home at the end of all this, not just having had a great experience of talking to each other, but also, igniting discussion, future discussion, a continuing discussion around these topics, and also potential future engagement. Yeah, I'm making some grand promises here. We don't want today to stay in this room. We want it to go out to our communities. If you have any questions on anything as things go along, not quite sure what to do, whatever else, please see me. If you run out of paper or pen, the admin ladies down in the back will be able to help you with that as well. Other than that, yeah, just enjoy the time.
Thanks. Right. So, last thing about the format, we're trying something new. We're calling this a mission think tank. That's kind of the goal, is to get us thinking together about mission. This is something we're interested in doing more of, potentially even making it a new core ministry focus for JEMA if it even needs to be there, or maybe it just can be an annual event that we do. So we're going to be sending out a survey in the next couple of days that's going to have some questions about the experience today. Please, if you have a minute, fill out the survey and give us, at whatever feedback you can give us. It can be positive, it can be negative, just it's going to be helpful for us as we think through kind of next steps and how we might be able to learn from today's experience. So we're not just actually doing it, we're also testing this format and want to be able to improve the format in the future as well. Okay, so that's first introduction. So let's actually talk about the topic. What are we going to be talking about today? Well, we wanted to take a topic that would be a good kind of starting topic for missionaries from JEMA and others that are connected to us to be able to discuss together and kind of use this think tank format to approach. And so when we're thinking about topics, one of the topics that has really arisen to the surface over the last couple of years, for me, from Japanese Christian leaders, has been the topic of the Japanese church ministering to foreign residents. And I was surprised by this the first time I heard it. I'm not going to lie. Part of it is because Japan can tend to be a little insular. I know that none of you guys know what I'm talking about, but it can be just a little bit. And the other thing was that it was being described in mission terms. And when, as an American missionary, I think mission target Japan. And so stretching it was challenging for me to hear our Japanese brothers and sisters raising this concern. And actually, one of the first times I heard it was at the JEMA annual meeting last year with a presentation from Yoshinaga Sensei from JOMA, who will be presenting today and will be kicking us off this morning. So after that experience, another big thing, how many of you were able to go to JCE7 this last year? Okay, great. So the Japan Congress on Evangelism, 7th annual, largest gathering of Christians that takes place in Japan. Really fascinating time, really beautiful time as well. But one of the major topics that was raised and given focus was this idea of ministry to foreign residents and the increasing number of foreign residents in Japan. And essentially hearing Japanese Christian leaders looking around and noticing that they're brushing shoulders with foreign people a whole lot more. They're in their church. They're also looking out and seeing people in their neighborhoods. They're feeling a desire and interest to engage, but kind of processing what to do about it. And so since they were raising this topic, I was trying to think of something that we could, weigh in helpfully about. And, just a quick survey. How many people here are foreign residents? Yeah, quite a few of us. And so there is a sense where our own experience can actually just be helpful in, having conversations with Japanese Christian leaders that are thinking about this. Of course, missionaries are interesting, and have a unique experience, as opposed to a number of the foreign residents who have come to Japan. However, we still think we have an interesting take on this, I think, that could be helpful. But what we want to start off doing is we do want to take a look at just some basic stats about foreign residents and the increase of foreign residents in Japan. So Simon has some stats. Are you going to talk through those, Simon? All right, good, thanks.
So yeah, I've just put a few slides together that shows stats on foreign residents in Japan from different sources. So this first one just shows the rise in the percentage of foreigners living in Japan. So at the moment it's around about 2.2, maybe 2.5 this year. But you can see like just a steady rise over the last 10 years or so, with a kind of a little bit of a dip where with COVID, but generally rising. And basically the prediction is it's just going to continue to rise. It's just the same thing but over a longer time scale. So it goes back all the way down to 1975. And I think if you've been in the country for a while, you've probably noticed that there's lots more foreigners on the streets. I know I've been here 20 years now, and yeah, it really stands out. This is the opposite. It's showing like Japanese living overseas. So again, like a general increase. And this is interesting because like many of these Japanese will come back to Japan as returnees. And so that raises the question: how do we engage and help them to settle back? And then this slide shows like the kind of breakup of the nationalities. So the top 10 nationalities in Japan. So probably the first two is no surprise, like China and Korea, just due to their proximity to Japan. And then you have like Southeast Asian countries. Brazil is like has historical roots with Japan. And yeah, in terms of Westerners are a really tiny proportion of foreign nationalities living in Japan.
Thanks, Simon. So just give you a little snapshot and overview of the situation. In terms of presenters today and panelists that are going to be participating that you're going to have a chance to hear from, we're going to begin by hearing from Yoshinaga Sensei. I'll introduce him in just a moment. And then we're going to have a lunch break after that. And then after that session, when we come back from lunch, we're going to have two panels. The first panel is going to be with a few of our mission leaders and basically kind of thinking about how are missions approaching this topic right now. What's going on right now and maybe what should be going on or what's not going on or those sorts of things. And we'll do that in a conversational format, and then we'll also have a time of Q&A for that session. And then the last one is looking at, kind of a newer as in like the last 10, 15 years development, and that is an increase of international and bilingual churches. And we wanted to kind of feature this group because their focus is, includes foreign residents, direct ministry to foreign residents. However, knowing some of these folks, a lot of them pursue international bilingual ministry with an aim at reaching Japanese people. Like that's one of their primary desires is actually to reach Japanese people. So even the people who are ministering to foreign residents aren't necessarily trying to intentionally minister to foreign residents that much. But it's a Japanese church that's saying they want to intentionally minister to foreign residents. So just an interesting conversation that we can potentially begin to have. So with no further ado, I'd love a chance to introduce our keynote speaker, who's going to be kind of setting the stage for us and introducing the topic from the perspective of the Japanese church. I do want to mention one more thing. We've got a good mix of folks here, like good mix of missionaries. But I also want to be really upfront, like mission belongs fundamentally to the Japanese church and Japanese Christians, and there aren't very many of them here. For the couple of you that are, thank you for being here. We're really glad that you're here. But there aren't many of them here, and we know that. And if we continue to do this, like for it to be, even more impactful, we think it would be more helpful to have engagement as well. So, please bear with us in knowing that that deficiency is very obvious, and we're aware of that. But thanks for playing along anyways, we figure things out. So Yoshinaga Sensei is an incredibly interesting leader, and I've really enjoyed just having a brief chance to get to know him a little bit. He is overseeing JEMA, which is the Japan Overseas Missionary Association. And so JEMA has a focus both of kind of resourcing those that are doing missions abroad, but also Japanese people who are ministering and seeking to do ministry within Japan. And then he has a lot of overlap with like churches that are focused on foreign residents. And Yoshinaga Sensei actually spent time overseas himself as a pastor in Indonesia. So he knows that cross-cultural experience firsthand, and speaks Indonesian, at least to some degree, yeah. And also some really good grasp of English as well as Japanese. So very, cosmopolitan leader. And he's also served as a prison chaplain and as a pastor here in Japan. And so we're really excited to have him. I did some research kind of looking around. Yoshinaga Sensei was one of the first people I heard bring up this topic. And then I did some additional research trying to figure out kind of who would be the most authoritative voice. And he was the first name that came up from several sources. So really thankful to have him with us today. And I'll turn it over to him now.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Tetsuya Yoshinaga, Executive Director of JEMA. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for inviting me to be a part of this important mission think tank. I'm very honored to be given this opportunity to speak here today. You are very present here in Japan in your testimony of missionary work. When I was pastor of Takamatsu Zion Church in Takamatsu City, Kagawa Prefecture, Shikoku, I was also a chaplain at Takamatsu Prison. One of my fellow chaplains was a monk of the Rinzai sect, Buddhist, and he explained it to me that the monk is called Jushoku, which means resident priest. This means that the monk's job is to lead, among others. That's wonderful. I have been subscribing to this kind of monthly magazine since last year. It is a monthly joint priest, Jushoku, Gekkan Jushoku. It is a monthly magazine for monks by monks involved with temples. In the December issue of the magazine, there were the following articles. Why are temples that have not decided on a successor to be a head priest targeted? Temples are moving from a danta system to a personalized system. What should temples do on New Year's Day? I found an article titled as follow to ideas and practice to encourage people to visit the temples on Christmas Day. How to make the most of the Hare no Hi. Hare no Hi is a special day. At the end of the year, one of the things that caught my interest was the idea of Christmas at the temple, as the description of Christmas as a Hare no Hi, which means special day, at the end of the year. I understand that they know Christmas is a Christian festival. So it is not a good idea to celebrate Christmas at a temple. But they believe it would be a shame to miss the Hare no Hi, Hare no Hi, Hare Day at the end of the year. I felt the underlying power of adaptability, indigenization, and contextualization of Buddhism, which Japanese Christianity does not have. What do you all think? I don't have time to talk about this subject today, but we must not forget the fact that the Japanese people are under the control of these Buddhist temples that are trying too hard to survive. Buddhism is often maligned as falling into the formalism of funeral Buddhism, but it is not what it used to be, but still has value. Let's open the Bible here, Acts chapter 6, verse 7, by NIV. So the word of God Spirit, the number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith. This is a passage that describes the situation of Jesus' disciples in Jerusalem, but just before this, the apostles declared that they would devote themselves to prayer and to the ministry of the word. A system was established whereby the seven stewards would take care of various practice matter within the group. Thus, the church increased the number of disciples and priests joined the church in large numbers. The disciples in Jerusalem were becoming a truly indigenous community, rooted in the local culture and context. At this point, however, I understand that the Lord Jesus' words of promise in Acts chapter 1, verse 8 were quite weak, although I cannot say how much they were echoed in the prayers and plans of the apostles, since the Bible does not describe them, but in these circumstances, God moves. After this, Stephen shared his testimony of faith and his understanding of the Bible and God, resulting in a backlash from the Jewish people and his death by martyrdom. From there, Saul led an intense persecution, and many men of the way who become disciples of Jesus were taken captive or fled Jerusalem to escape capture. It was God's time that has come, and His missionary word to lead them in a different direction from their church forming work in Jerusalem. The disciples of Jesus were under the painful, sad, and very difficult circumstances of persecution, but they followed God's guidance and moved forward while keeping their thoughts strongly in their hearts about their God family in Jerusalem. This allowed the church to take the next step forward. The conversion of Saul, the martyrdom of the apostle James, and Peter's participation in the Cornelius family meeting occurs simultaneously with the following events, and finally that next step become clear. The next biblical passage is the same Acts chapter 11, from verse 19 to 21. This time I don't read Bible, but please attention it. What is written here is the evangelization of Antioch and the formation of the church by the unknown congregation. Barnabas was sent from Jerusalem to prepare the flock, and the addition of Saul to the flock by Barnabas established a firm and stable foundation for the flock. At the time of the worship service, God directly called the people of the flock to worldwide mission. This is recorded in Acts chapter 13 onward. It is not wrong for the church to seek to have itself set up and become the Jerusalem church, but it is clear that this is not the ultimate goal. The church should aim to be mission-centered church, a gospel-centered church, in order to bring about the kingdom of God and to manifest His glory. The next is I will report about JC7. The corona disaster triggered a historical turning point for the Great Reset in the business world. And likewise, the Christian church naturally had to change throughout the world. What had been the norm up until the point? Contemporary change, God has passed the reset switch, saying the text of JC7, Mission Guide 2023. This book. I think the situation is very similar to the events of 2000 years ago, when the work of the Holy Spirit was changing from Jerusalem to Antioch. And the C7 asked what kind of work to church and Christian are required by God to take in this new era. I urge you to read this mission guide. There are 9 themes in this textbook. Chapter 1, the Christian world, epidemics, earthquake, and disaster. Chapter 2, increasing number of foreign residents and mission cooperation with foreign language churches in Japan. 3, overseas Japanese language churches and congregations. 4, challenging of local missions and proposal for solutions. 5, nurturing the next generation. 6, social consciousness of Christian youth. 7, currency and cult issues today, trend and missional challenges. 8, IT and the church. 9, church formation. For example, chapter 1 on the corona response read as follows. Due to the corona disaster, worship attendance at large churches dropped by about 80%. However, about 10% of churches reported an increase. It's a miracle. Most of the categories such as worship, other meetings, fellowships, baptism, and donation are decreasing. Online worship service have been introduced by 64% of churches, and about 80% of churches have implemented online worship service, including those that have been doing so before the corona disaster. The corona disaster has raised issue with the congregation centeredness and event centeredness of Japanese churches, and may suggest that missionary work will move forward in a more personal relationship. Just now for current situation and seeking the right shape of the church. Current situation 1 about Japanese society. In Japan today, one of the major problems is declining population. There are many causes, but the declining birth rate and aging population are among the most significant factors. Population last year, January, 122 million for 420,000. This population, 14th consecutive year of decline. Prediction 25 years later to 2048 may be 99 million 130,000. 37 years later, 2048 60, 86 million 740,000. The causes, birth rate, and aging population. As a result, it is clear that the labor force will decrease. In response to this situation, the Japanese government has implemented policies to obtain labor from Southeast Asia and the Nikkei community. And in recent years, the number of foreign workers has been increasing for exceeding the number of foreign students. The increasing from 2009 to 15 was about 46,000 in 6 years. Increase from 15 to 21 was about 528,000 in 6 years. Survey 22 2020 about 2.8 million overall. And June 2023, medium to long-term residents 2,938,51, permanent residents 284,807, total 3,223,858, increase of about 150,000 people per year. Under this circumstance, the government and private sector are cooperating in various ways to create the society where people can live together with non-Japanese people, especially in local communities where many foreign residents live. Under the slogan of multicultural conviviality, will be a turning point in the history of modern Japan, which has been aiming to form a monoethnic, monolingual society. There's also a possibility the deductivity, isolated Japanese culture, a cultural manifestation of self-importance that does not communicate with the rest of the world. Resulting from this will be transformed into a better culture impression. For example, 同調圧力 peer pressure 空気読め read between the lines. The current situation too about the church in Japan. However, in these days, when multicultural conviviality is being called for in general society. The Christian church should be the one to take the initiative in putting this into practice. In reality, however, the Christian church is too far removed from the current society situation. That is, it is close to the outside world and content with creating and operating a community that is comfortable only by itself. It has become a Jerusalem church. It is a shame. Foreign situation 3, about foreign residents and foreign language churches. There have been many Chinese and Korean churches for a long time, and they have become the largest churches in terms of numbers and organizations. In recent years, Brazilian, Filipino, Indonesian, Vietnamese, and Nepalese churches has been born and gradually increasing. Among them, the number of Vietnamese and Nepalese is increasing remarkably. Here, I invite you to watch a video of my friend, Mr. Sagar Vista, a Nepalese Christian.
Hello everyone, greeting to respected leader and entire JEMA family. I'm Sagar Vista from Nepal, serving as an elder in the Nagoya Nepali Church and president of Nepali Christian Unity Society Japan. Today I would like to highlight the Nepali Christian communities here in Japan. Here are approximately 14 Nepali churches in different Japanese cities with a population of 600 to 700. Out of the figure, around 40 to 50 people have become Christians after coming to Japan. Moreover, among those 14 churches, we have only 4 pastors, 6 elders, 6 deacons, and some leaders. We have only 1 full-time pastor. The Nepalese Christians community has founded a Nepali Christian Unity Society Japan in 2016, which aims to bring all Nepali Christians communities together and collaborate on the strength of all Nepali believers here in Japan. However, in the last few years, it has been extending many other programs such as monthly meeting, monthly online fellowship, and revival programs once a year. Additionally, Nagoya Nepali Church was established on January 28, 2018. In the beginning, there were 7 students, and it all started in a small kitchen where a few students used to stay. However, as the number increased, the room became too small to gather for prayers. After a year, we searched for a bigger room near Nagoya stations and moved there. That was also a personal room for one of our church members, renting as a personal room and using as a church. We had to overcome many problems. The neighbors were complaining time and again. Among all of those difficulties, we continued our fellowship for 3 years in the same place. Since July 2022, we have shifted to Kanayama Christian Church, and now we are around 60 to 70 people. Challenges for our churches. As the number of members increase, we are facing many challenges too. Among all 4 pastors, no one holds a religious visa. Being company employees, they cannot give priority to the church, so that we couldn't grow spiritually properly. And out of 14 churches, no one has our own buildings for the service. 2 of them are renting, some are using Japanese churches, and some are even in one rooms. Because of not having one building, we cannot organize number of program and fellowship for mass. Despite having such challenges, we are having a blessed fellowship, and we are expecting your continuous prayer. Thank you.
Lastly, Japanese churches' involvement with foreigner and the need of churches. The current aging the population of Japanese church, as well as the difficulty in attracting new members, has led it from the status quo into the path of decline. The possibility of future recovery is extremely low, and if nothing is done about it, the church will have no choice but to disappear. However, if we look at the church not from the perspective of the current situation, but from the perspective of God's guidance, we can say that the possible positive future is very possible. Our God is the one who called something out of nothing, and He is the one who uses the foolish and small and those equal to nothing to His work and express His glory. If only we follow God's guidance. With possibilities of involvement with foreign residents and ordinary Japanese people. Point word or firstly, openness, self-reformation, to live as a good neighbor, to be a gospel-centered church. Second, treat like family. When there are foreigners who gather to other service, your service and meeting attend to their needs as if they were family members. Third, cooperation. In cooperation with other churches in the area, involved in exchange with foreign language churches in the area, and the mission cooperation that comes from such exchanges. 4. Boldness. Involvement is exchange and mutual help between local people, the foreigners living in the community, centering on Japanese language classes and other activities. Sometimes they will take a leave. In the case, cooperative relationships with the government and social welfare council may be created, uh, which may be of great benefit to the subsequent social support work of the churches. That's all. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yoshinaga Sensei. If you don't mind remaining for a moment, we're going to take a few minutes for Q&A. So if you have a question about anything that was presented or just about the topic in general, all I would ask is that you use a mic. So just if you want to raise your hand, I'll bring the mic to you.
I'll take this one in the back, but as I'm going, I've got a question. In your opinion, in the eyes of the Japanese church, well, let me preface this. Let me back up just a little bit. Tsuyakiさんですか？
吉永先生のご意見を聞きたいんですけども、日本の教会の視点から。
In the missiological world, we often categorize unreached countries as open or closed, restricted access or free access to go as a missionary and share the gospel.
宣教学のことを考えると、多くの場合、ある国は、オープンな国、あるいは、クローズ、いう部分にしてるんですけども。
And so, in particular, if God is bringing restricted access country individuals to Japan, then that seems like a prime opportunity while they're here for the Japanese people to reach out to them in the same way that, for example, the Japanese residents, come to other countries, even though it's not a restricted access country, it's slow. So a prime opportunity to reach them with maybe the end goal of sending the gospel back. Is that on the heart and is that on the radar? Is that on the heart and mind of the Japanese church? Or do you think that they just sort of classify all as non-Japanese residents and see them with one lens?
ある国から来る、外国人は、もともとの、国は、福音に、閉鎖的、であって、日本に来て初めて、自由に、福音宣教に関われたり、自由に福音を聞く機会が、あると思うんですけれども、そういった、外国人、日本在住の外国人に向けた宣教を意識して他の外国人とまた異なるアプローチをとっていることがありますでしょうか。日本人が海外に行ってそこで福音を聞く機会が日本にいる時より高いというケースと同じようにそういった外国の方も日本に来て福音に触れ、そして母国に帰ることがそういうことがあると思うんですけれども、日本の教会は外国人を見た時にそういった区別をしているでしょうか。それとも一つの大きな括りとして捉えていますか。
日本という国は確かにどちらかというと文化的にクローズな、メンタリティもクローズな国かなと私は見ています、日本人は。
I think in general, Japanese society, Japanese culture tends to have a closed mindset.
遠藤周作という作家は日本の国は沼地だと言いました。
So, Shusaku Endo in his book Silence calls Japan a swamp.
だから何が入ってきてもみんなその沼地にはまり込んでそれらしいものが出てこない。みんな泥沼になってしまうみたいなことを遠藤周作は言っています。
And so he's saying that no matter what comes into Japan, they get swallowed up by that swamp. And nothing else is born but what can survive there.
で、それはキリスト教も確かに、日本という沼地にはまってしまって、何か力を失ってしまっているかもしれません。
And so perhaps as Endo suggests, Christianity comes to Japan and is swallowed up by the swamp as well and loses its power.
ところが、日本の選挙の歴史を学んでみると、江戸時代の前にザビエルというカトリックの宣教師が来て伝道したときに、たくさんの人がイエス様を信じました。
However, as you study and reflect on missions history in Japan, when Xavier came 500 years ago, many people, many Japanese people were converted.
それはザビエルがその信徒が信徒を導くということに徹したからだと私は理解しています。
And I believe one of the big reasons behind that was Xavier was committed to lay people leading lay people.
その前後してロシアからも一人の宣教師がやってきます。
And then again, at another time, there was a missionary who came to Japan from Russia.
このお茶の水に有名なありますよね。今に忘れちゃった。ニコライ。そうそう。ニコライさんです。
So there's a very famous Russian missionary, Nikolai, and the church established is just nearby here in Japan.
ニコライは北海道、東北、関東と伝道しましたが、ザビエルと同じように、たくさんの人が実はクリスチャンになったのです。
And so he ministered in Hokkaido, Tohoku, and in the Kanto area, and actually many people became Christians.
で、彼もまた、信徒が信徒を導くということで伝道しました。
And in his evangelism, again, he was committed to lay people, ministering to lay people.
で、私は思うに、日本の地は確かに沼地かもしれないけれども、神の恵みをいただいた信徒が動くときに、日本は変わると私は信じています。これが一つの答えです。
And so one answer is, though Japan may indeed be a swamp, when God's people, by the power of His grace, are ministering to others, then I believe that Japan will change.
で、もう一つの質問がありましたが、外国の人が日本に来て救われて自分の国に帰って伝道するというケースは、先ほどのネパールの教会の場合、実際にあります。
And then returning to your question about foreign residents becoming Christians in Japan and then perhaps returning to their home countries, that's exactly what we see in the Nepalese community.
日本の教会はネパールの教会やベトナムの人たちの教会をサポートしたり、一緒に協力して伝道することで、実は日本にいながらにしてネパール宣教やベトナム宣教が実現できるということが今起ころうとしています。
And so when Japanese churches are able to cooperate with the Nepali community and the Vietnamese community, they are indeed ministering to Nepalese and Vietnamese, partnering in that foreign mission as well, here in Japan.
どうでしょうか。
ありがとうございます。はい。
What we're going to be doing now is we're going to have a panel discussion on missionaries and ministry to foreign residents. And so, as we have now heard early on, the Japanese church has been increasingly having the conversation about, hey, there's a lot of foreign residents who are coming to Japan. This should probably impact our ministry. Many of our churches should think about how we can be more open to ministering to foreign residents or reaching foreign residents. Really grateful for Yoshinaga Sensei kind of setting the stage for us. What we want to do right now is we want to get a sense what missionaries may already be doing, and also what are some of the kind of prevailing missiologies as it relates to ministering to foreign residents. So I've asked a few mission leaders if they'd be willing to be part of this panel, and we're just going to have kind of a casual conversation. I'm going to ask some questions and things, but I'm hoping this will be kind of comfortable sitting around a table. And even though we don't have a table, you guys have tables. And we'll get started. So let me pray for us, and then we'll go from there. Father, thank you so much for this afternoon. Thank you for a good lunch. Thank you for the opportunity to be with brothers and sisters who are ministering across Japan, with a similar vision to see your glory known and enjoyed. God, we pray that you would bless us with your presence as we think and wrestle with these things. Give us good conversations, courage to share. And we thank you for the opportunity. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. So, do you guys mind just introducing yourselves real quick? Maybe you can just share what's your name, what organization you're with, and what your role is, and how long you've been in Japan. Does that work? Chris, you want to start?
Okay, I'm Chris Payne with OMF. I've been in Japan since 2007 and I'm field director, so I lead our team in Japan.
Here, switch me, Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Schutz. I am with Pioneers in Japan, and I've been here since 2008. And my role is area leader, so it's somewhat similar to a field director, except that I'm not particularly responsible for deciding where everyone goes, but keeping our team leaders accountable to the ministries that they themselves are deciding they are doing.
And I'm Robert Adair with some combination of A3 Asian Access or SIM, depending where you're looking. And I lead the team here, been in Japan since 2005.
All right. Thank you guys so much. Well, let's dive in. During your tenure, both as missionaries and as mission leaders, how have you seen the demographics of Japan change as it relates to an increase in foreign residents? What's your personal experience been like? Anyone can jump in. Go ahead, Chris.
So I guess I moved from Hokkaido down to Kanto 4 years ago, so that feels like a big change. Rather than to do with necessarily the change in demographic, but I think definitely in our area where I live right now, we're seeing way more people coming in for like labouring jobs and serving in the convenience stores and things like that. So we've definitely noticed an increase of foreigners around us as well, people in our area moving in. So yeah, we've definitely seen an increase.
So the first 2 years I lived in Hokkaido as well, and my impression during that time is there were noticeable foreigners that were living in the community that I lived in. But when I moved to Fukuoka, and I've been there for the last 14 years, initially it was very obvious that I was a minority, and we had a lot more Asian foreigners in our community. So just generally looking around, I would often feel like, oh, I'm the only one. But then as you would listen into conversations, you'd be like, nope, they're speaking Korean, they're speaking Chinese, they're speaking Vietnamese. And so I think like noticing like that there's a large Southeast Asian population is definitely grown in our area.
And similarly, the closest station to us is right by the port fisheries area. And just over the last few years, there's times I hop off the train and there's more foreigners than Japanese people getting off the train.
Yeah, that matches my experience as well. I remember as a new missionary going to a convenience store, and there were Japanese people working at the convenience store, and now that's not normally the case. So there certainly is a demographic shift that we've all been kind of experiencing. So the next question I have, again, for each of you is, within your mission, do you have any direct engagement with ministering to foreign residents? Like, are some of the churches that you're affiliated with doing that, or some of the missionaries that you lead doing that? What's already going on?
We don't. Hello? We lost another one. I know, right? Cool. We don't have direct intentional engagement, but we have a lot of passive secondary engagement. So several folks that as a part of ministry with a local church or congregation have met friends in the community and it's kind of grafted in an organic or natural way.
I would say generally we see a similar thing where it's been this unintentional but natural connections with other foreigners. We have a pretty broad spectrum of how the churches we're partnered with view this situation. There's some that deliberately see, oh, right, we have someone who's Vietnamese, someone who's Korean. Let's intentionally build that bridge to these communities. We've had other churches say, no, we actually want our English service to reach Japanese, so let's make sure that it reaches Japanese people. And we have another house church in Miyazaki where the team leader and his wife said, we want to reach Japanese people, but somehow they ended up meeting a ton of foreigners living in their area. And so they said, you know what, we'll just take whoever God brings us. We're going to learn songs in their language. We're going to try and incorporate that into our Japanese service as well.
Interesting. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yeah, so as IMF, we have planted some international churches in the past, but I think we're probably moving away from that more at the moment, just partly because of where our vision is to really try and plant indigenous churches. And also we see other people doing that role really well. So we're kind of moving away from that, but we have done it in the past. We are working with some Chinese churches to help them reach Japanese. So we have workers who are Chinese speaking and they're helping them reach the Japanese. That's a slightly different dynamic, like the already established churches who then finding second and third generation kids who are really more Japanese than Chinese. So that's another area we've kind of been involved. My own church plant, my Japanese pastor and his wife have a real heart for reaching out to internationals. So we actually have a Thai Moldovan couple in our church that they kind of reached out to. So they're thinking about this issue, and the pastor's wife recently took a Japanese teaching qualification with the thought of can they do more in the future. So that's just a kind of outside OMF, but what I see in my church plant that I'm part of. And then we've had a church plant, for instance, that we started, and then we got a lot of JET teachers join. It was wonderful because they're really enthusiastic Christians, but after a while it started to feel quite foreign, and the church they were trying to plant was supposed to be really reaching the Japanese. And so we kind of had to make some adjustments there. So that's some of our different experiences.
Thanks so much. All right, Chris, I'm going to pick on you for a second. So you made reference to kind of an increased focus, I know this historical as well, on planting indigenous churches. How would you define an indigenous church? Particularly, what are you contrasting that with?
Yeah, so I guess, it's part of our OMF kind of international vision that we look for indigenous biblical church movements. So we're looking that whatever we hand over is going to be led by Japanese and kind of contextualized to a Japanese context. And of course, globalized Japan, you could well have in certain parts of the country, churches which are appropriately international. So it's not that we're against that, but most of our areas where we're trying to go to unreached areas, kind of more outside the big cities, then that's less, although some rural areas, of course, there are a lot of foreigners, but overall, that's where we're kind of aiming. So,
yeah, that's great. Thanks. Robert, A3 is not doing direct missionary church planting, so you guys aren't doing direct church planting. Within the Japanese churches that you're kind of working with and partnering with, or is there kind of an increased interest or desire in ministering to foreign residents? Is that showing up?
It is not where our people are right now, but recently I've had more conversations with Japanese pastors who are asking us if we can send somebody. I had one asking to help us meet a Chinese population in their area, another that had an interest in reaching out to a Filipino Filipino community in their area. And so we're at a spot where we're wrestling through, basically, is that a road we want to go down?
Yeah. Are you able to share kind of how you're thinking at this moment, or
I can
or
share.
what are the factors you're wrestling with? Or
I can share what Robert thinks about this at this
that
moment.
works.
What I
Your
say.
unofficial position, that's fine.
But I think the tensions I'm wrestling with is, so I had a Japanese friend challenge me years ago when I was talking about reaching Japanese people, and he was like, "You're not called just to reach Japanese people, but you're called to reach the people in Japan." And I think there's theologically, missiologically, like, I think God desires for all people in Japan to come to know Him. There's also within our organization, I think we have some areas of competency or that God's called us to. And there's something in being faithful in that. And so how do we kind of navigate the tension between everything we could be doing, all the good things we could be doing, with the thing we're actually called to do? The other tension that I'm wrestling with is, and I think somebody touched on it earlier, is I've had folks on my team who have said, either because of language, like it's easier to reach out to people in English than it is in Japanese, or for responsiveness. I had a conversation with one of our people that says basically they were interacting with folks, Chinese background people in Tokyo, they are responding to the gospel quicker than Japanese people are. Therefore, we need to put our energy into reaching out to these communities. And so how do we balance out aligning with what God's doing, responding to areas where there's response, versus being faithful or understanding that in light of being faithful to what God has called us to as a mission, and just trying to sort that out.
Yeah.
So there's no answer there. We're just trying to figure it out. Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Stephanie, where's Pioneers on all of this right now?
Just thinking about what is our response to the foreign population. Are actually not really been driven so much by what's been happening within Japan itself, but as pioneers globally. So we're not sent from one mobilization base. We have 17 offices around the world. And some of our fastest growing mobilization offices are Brazil and also in Africa, in Kenya and in Ghana. And so trying to think through, our organization is mobilizing Christians from all these different countries across the world. Are we equipped to receive them as co-workers alongside of us? And then what's that going to look like in Japan? And so obviously, I think they're going to attract different opportunities, especially if they're doing more tent making ministries. Most of us are here on religious visas, so that will change the type of ministry we do. But I think just by the fact that we're welcoming other people from other countries to be part of our work will change the ministry, what it looks like for us too.
Hop in. Yeah, go ahead.
Just, yeah, maybe one other thing, just something that we try and talk about in OMF is the 6 ways of mission. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but talking about learning about mission, praying about mission, mobilizing for mission, sending in mission and going in mission. But then the 6th one is welcoming. So when we're thinking about when we plant churches and how do we plant churches which are going to be missional and eventually think about reaching out to their neighbors, but then also cross-culturally as well. Actually, that component of welcoming the foreigners here is something that we do want to see built into the churches that we're planting. So we have to model it at some level, but we're a bit shy of making it a commitment for our workers who've spent a lot of time learning Japanese and put a lot of effort into that.
Yeah. Now, you guys all are familiar with this conversation that's been happening from a number of Japanese Christian leaders about, giving more focus to ministry to foreigners. Just was this surprising to anybody that this has come on the radar, or what were kind of your feelings or responses learning that this was a topic of discussion? So important that it got mentioned at JCE7 as one of the main topics to think about. Yeah, anybody can go first.
If I can be very frank, I did think, yes, it's about time we're having this conversation.
Okay.
I guess even though that nothing's been intentional in any of our churches and partnerships, when I first moved to Fukuoka, my closest friend were Chinese exchange students because that's who I met at my Japanese classes. And so it's been on my radar, how do I encourage them to come to church with me? Is there a safe place for them to come to church with me? And so I'm just really glad that churches are thinking who's in our neighborhood and how can we be reaching out and loving them.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't that surprised.
Yeah.
I mean, but just anecdotally, there'd been enough anecdotal conversations that I've been a part of that very happy to hear that it's happening at a national scale. It's an important conversation.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much the same. I thought it was really interesting to see at JC7, the international night for kind of its Christianity in Japan, which was a very different flavor from, what we saw the rest of the week. But that was really encouraging. And I think that we heard of it this morning, but that desire to embrace the kind of diversity and the complexity and all the wonderful kind of variety within God's kingdom is really healthy. And it's going to be a good thing overall.
One interesting nuance, over the weekend, I knew we were having this discussion, so I was asking a pastor I was with what he thought about the subject. And his take on it was that the Japanese church needs to be intentional in this area, and the missions community needs to stay focused on Japanese people.
Interesting. What do you think is motivating that?
I think the primary motivation, I think, is a historical image of what is a missionary.
Yeah.
But I think there's also elements of stewardship, capacity. Why spend all this money to have Robert come all the way to Japan and pay for me to be in Japan to reach people, especially in my case, those demographics are all represented in the States. And so I think but I think it's predominantly coming from the historical image of the missionary.
Sure.
One thing that I did think was maybe a note of caution, when I hear it expressed from a missiological perspective, this is our responsibility to reach out to these people alongside ourselves. That's great. Occasionally I've heard a pastor talk about this could be the solution for my dying church. And that's a bit more worrying because I think that's probably not the right motive, and also probably people not going to be equipped to do it well.
Interesting. What makes you concerned about that?
So if you are only reaching to sustain yourself, that's kind of self-centered, and the gospel is different from that. And then also because I think it's going to involve a lot of change if we do it well. If you welcome people into your church, it should change you as well. And so to actually not be doing it so that we can sustain what's here, but thinking more, how do we change together? and then that will hopefully give birth to outreach to Japanese people in the area as well. I mean, not, it may already be happening, but just that difference in motive and desire, what the desire to do it is, I think is quite important.
So you said you had reservations about it. Your reservations right now sound like they're more about the specific ways that might go about as opposed to the general concept.
Yeah, like the church should definitely be doing this. I think
Okay.
that's really important. But yeah, what's motivating, what's driving it?
Yeah.
And if it's just to sustain what's there, then that's a different kind of motive that I'm not so sure about. And it's not common, but I have heard one or two people kind of getting excited. This is the solution for my church. Like if I can get a bunch of foreigners in, maybe my church won't die.
Yeah.
And that's
And-
intention there.
And in that, I'm familiar with some similar situations, but in that, do you think that's primarily thinking about they're going to bring finances, or they're just going to bring people, or what do you think is the draw or the attraction in that maybe not so positive way?
I mean, I guess both of those things, right?
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. But
Yeah.
just that's conversations I've had. So yeah.
Interesting. One thing that's interesting, in my recent experience, we go to a Japanese church, small kind of traditional Japanese church, and it feels like a traditional Japanese church. And when I say that, I think everybody has like an image of what I mean by that, and it's kind of clear. And I think when you use the word indigenous, I think a lot of people, our minds would actually go to that indigenous meaning traditional. I know that's not what you mean, Chris, and feel free to hop in and try to clean me up on that. But in that traditional church, what's fascinating is that the demographic in this church over the last 10 years has become completely without planning, very international, to where maybe even like 1/3 of regular attenders are from are not from Japan. And yet it hasn't been like an intentional kind of effort that's been done. I think there are some pastors that are like that right now, that are basically kind of looking around and maybe even looking at us missionaries and going, what am I supposed to do? If a pastor were to ask you that, how would you all kind of respond, or how might you advise? Churches become international even though it wasn't necessarily an intention. Should I kick all these foreigners out of here, or what do I do? Anybody want to hop in?
What's the JEMA line on this one?
There is never a JEMA line.
I'm hesitant to say what any Japanese pastor should do.
Oh, that's really wise. But he's asking you for advice.
Right. No, yeah,
I mean, you're a missionary.
Yeah.
You know all about foreign residents.
Yeah.
How should I think about this? What should I do?
Yeah, and I think that's where it's learning. It's a learner's posture. It's praying. It's trying to figure out how to care for the people. It feels like such a case-by-case situation. So I think it's going back to questions, discernment, finding people that have maybe a few steps farther down the road with that journey of exploring what international church looks like. Humility and curiosity seem the key.
Yeah, I was just thinking of my own personal situation. So this isn't necessarily for all pioneers, but the situation I work in, we intended to plant a Japanese church with a Japanese pastor. But the very fact that I'm a noticeable foreigner attracted other people to come. Like if they're looking on the website, there's an assumption, hey, there's a white girl, they probably speak English. And so they'll just show up. So we did somewhat have to wrestle through so if we're setting about, having a Japanese church, how do you deal with this? And what we decided is we're going to continue to speak in Japanese. If people can't speak Japanese and they need translation, we'll provide that, but that's not going to be the way we run the church. We're going to still make that first. And I think what ended up happening is we've attracted a lot of Japanese-speaking foreigners as well. And one of the nice things that ended up coming through that is there's actually quite a lot of foreigners who don't speak English. Like they are having to speak in Japanese as their second language too. And so I think, just being able to say we're going to engage with these people, we're going to meet them where they're at, but this is just going to be an understanding, and that's just one of the decisions that churches have to make, like one of the logistics. But just still saying we can have a place in these people's lives, even if we have to make certain choices of how we'll run the church.
So in that setting, the church is distinct from what we might call an international bilingual church. And we're going to have some pastors kind of helping us think through that this afternoon, which I'm looking forward to. But so that's distinct from kind of the international bilingual church.
Yeah.
And yet as a church that has a presence of a number of foreign residents.
Yes.
like in that situation, are you trying to make their lives easier? Like, are there ways that you're sort of, leaning into that, or or is it just kind of, we really can't do anything about it. We've accepted it as just part of the territory.
I guess like I'm not sure what you mean by making their lives easier. Like if they truly cannot speak Japanese, we do have someone who does like the radio translation. So it's not happening bilingual in front of everyone, but maybe on like behind the scenes it's happening bilingually. Yeah, if people come and just in conversation and translation, I'm willing to pitch in and help with that as well. But I think all of them are part of one of our small groups. Like we don't have just like one special small group for all the foreigners. They're sprinkled throughout the congregation. And so there's like this real intentionality in trying to get them engaged with the full life of the church, not feel like second-class citizens.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting to me. And when I hear the Japanese church like kind of thinking about this, I think that's a very interesting direction. Because on the one hand, you have, it's great if we can increase partnerships with, churches that have predominantly Nepalese or churches that have primarily Brazilians. But there is this dynamic that's happening where the Japanese church, as we know it, is becoming more international. And how do we have a, posture of hospitality and welcoming? It sounds like you guys are getting to try that out.
Just one last comment
Sure.
with that. I was sharing with my small group earlier. Unfortunately, for various reasons, I've had to do several hospital stays within Japan. And through that, I met a Christian doctor, and she said, "You're a great case study. You can help my doctors just know how to approach a foreigner because many of them are afraid, they don't know what to do." And it was really interesting to be part of that project, and they had done research and found that most foreigners actually know more simple Japanese than they do English. And so there's a lot of presuppositions by pastors of like, oh, in order to engage with this foreigner, I need to know English. But the research showed if you just speak simple Japanese, like you would to a child or to a younger person,
Or to me.
Or me, yeah. Like you're just going to have a far better communication situation if you go about that. And so I think the takeaway for me as well, like in churches, we can probably apply that same principle. Like we're foreigners, we can speak simple Japanese, like we don't have to retrain ourselves. So just having that awareness and teaching our pastors how to communicate with foreigners in simple Japanese can be really effective as well.
I think that sounds beautiful. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
No, you carry on.
Okay. When we think about indigenous versus international church and kind of the presence of foreign residents, Chris, part of your hesitation about this was you want to plant indigenous churches. Can indigenous churches be filled with lots of foreign residents?
Yeah, so I guess when we're talking about Indigenous, the initiative is with Japanese leadership, and definitely like the church that I'm in, Japanese pastors leading it with a heart to reach internationals. We're fully behind that within the church. I guess where we are organisationally as OMF is that we're trying to go into some of the more unreached areas. We see other people working really well in those spaces, so we'll go to places where it's probably more appropriate to be less international and more focused on a Japanese church that's going to welcome people who are not so comfortable with the international engagement. I think probably we've met people who are very comfortable with that sort of diversity. They find that welcoming, they find that easier to be in. That's great. But probably we're focused in a slightly different area. But that's where we are as an organisation, because we're thinking through where should our focus be, not kind of as a missiological conviction that that's right for everybody.
Sure.
So I think, like my pastor, it's a really interesting guy. He did his missiology in the States. As a missiological kind of contextualization, he deliberately has English in the worship songs because he's like, that's what all the young people are listening to. And so he's like, and so he sees that kind of international flavor is an important part of planting a church in the urban context that we're in.
Very interesting. So again, along these lines of kind of the indigenous church and international church, these kind of concepts that we're, working with more and more. Question for any of you guys: can a missionary plant an indigenous church?
Yes.
Anyone want to weigh in?
What are you asking?
Okay. So,
I mean, yes would be a simple answer, but
yes.
What's the question behind your question?
Well, in thinking about ministry to foreign residents, I think it's really common for missionaries to want to have a focus primarily on reaching Japanese. I think that's present in some of the OMS kind of thinking right now. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's my own natural thinking. However, if you're in a church planting situation where the missionary is the one who's doing the church planting, is the kind of primary pastor, uh, is that church not kind of essentially at the very beginning an international church in the fact that you have an international pastor?
So we don't have an official policy. Oops.
Yeah.
We don't have an official policy within Pioneers, but generally our teams have chosen to partner with Japanese pastors
Okay.
from the beginning, just because of that awareness of
Interesting.
like we ourselves will have to go through different forms of thinking or efforts what would come very naturally for them. And so our stance has been, how do we empower leaders when we can, and if we can't, how do we just invite their voices into what's happening in decision making?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we do have some OMF-led church plants, but we're also trying to increase our partnerships in church planting. So we're working alongside or under Japanese leadership because of the tensions there. But also, I think even if where you're thinking about where your church goes, that can change some decisions you make. Like, how am I going to focus on the leadership structure? What languages are we going to allow or encourage for fellowship or not? How is the church going to be organized? What other church relationships are we going to build? Are we going to build with others that are more international or others that are more, stronger Japanese connections? So, of course, the fact that you're a foreigner affects the church, but equally the choices you make kind of set some things around the trajectory and where this church is going to kind of find its landing place eventually. So I think that's where the difference comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think two other examples I think of is we've partnered and worked with churches that one where it was a gentleman who was, a U.S. citizen, I think, but he'd grown up in Japan. He was kind of a TCK type who was leading a church, and another working with a Korean pastor who was kind of in the mix of Korean Japanese culture. And I think those were, I think they fall within it.
Indigenous church.
Indigenous, yeah. I'm hesitant to get to cut things too thinly.
Sure.
Define it too tightly. Like, we're for the church. We want to see people in Japan reached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for entertaining a difficult question there. And part of what leads me to ask that, I'll share this and then we'll move into Q&A time. I've got mutual friends that have been working on church planting together, and the missionary is the primary church planter and has a Japanese guy that is a seminary student, so he's not planning to be there long term, but has been joining in and assisting. And for the missionary, the desire was really to have like a Japanese church, and that's been the vision. It's a very good vision, very well thought out. And yet the person kind of pushing for them to consider using, bilingual services or to embrace their international identity is actually the Japanese team member. And his rationale is, this is like the primary thing you guys bring to the table is your foreignness. And it's the thing you seem kind of most keen to want to kind of, cover up and hide. And it's led to really good conversations with their team, like kind of wrestling with what does all of this mean. But that's one of the things I love about this topic is that it just kind of highlights the complexities of the current situation that we're in. It's probably a little bit different than it was 20, 30 years ago. Well, thank you guys so much. And I'm going to keep you on the spot and we're going to open up the floor for others to ask questions. I'm going to grab a mic stand so we can do this well. If you'd like to come ask a question, we're going to do this for several minutes. You're welcome to come up to the front and ask a question. You can direct towards one panelist or do it open-ended.
Stephanie says she wants all the hard ones.
So in the discussion of international and indigenous churches, it seems like we're talking about this in relation to, say, the nationality or ethnicity of the people involved. Would you say that, what do you see the relationship between that question, what makes an indigenous versus international? It seems to me that a big part of that is, for lack of a better term, is the church internally self-sustaining, that is not, dependent on foreign support. How do you see that relating, one, to the definition, and then two, about the strategic nature of being indigenous or international? Does that question, kind of two-part question, make sense? I'll break it. Sorry, I shouldn't have done a two-part question. Number one, when we talk about indigenous versus international, where does the concept of how is the church sustained come into that delineation, and how do we what should we be prioritizing in that?
My knee-jerk reaction to that question that I may not agree with in 15 minutes is that in being Indigenous, there's something about being pleasing or fitting local sensibilities and being sustainable within local sensibilities. And I think about when I think international and I think outside of the major cities, I think it's difficult to have a church that's sustainable with international sensibilities. And so I think that sustainability piece is a big piece of what it means. Chris, you you're ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking some similar things, because I think, as we've sort of talked a bit, you could have a contextualized church, indigenous, like led by Japanese people, intentionally international, and that would be absolutely great. That's fine, but it's going, and that's going to hit a particular part of Japanese society. But if you're in a different area, you're going to need a different approach, and so maybe that international indigenous isn't, we use it as kind of a helpful shorthand. There's times when that breaks down, because actually an international church could well be indigenous. So it's, but what I think we're looking for is, where's the decision-making power, where's the theologizing and the self-sustaining, but also like governance and all those things coming from. And so, and then in terms of where it goes next, in terms of reproduction. So where in a city, obviously you could plant potentially international churches, but in some of the other areas that may be less of a sustainable solution for sort of long-term health and growth. So it's how you work those things out. And again, in the big cities, I think probably there's a greater level of sort of longer-term residence, whereas my picking up of what happens in the rural areas, you do have a lot of people coming through, but they're on quite short-term visas. And they're also limited sometimes in their freedom. We were picking that up in our group earlier, a couple of people sharing, like, they've done some outreach to people who are into fisheries or agriculture, and then they've come to one event, and then their boss has kind of shut them down and said, no, you can't do that. You can't go to that place and be part of that social group. So that changes what maybe you think about the church and how it's sustainable long term, although the church still has a duty to reach those people. So it's just whether that's the missionary's primary focus, I would say.
Hearing your question, my thoughts kind of went a little bit rabbit trailing, but another thing I thought of is, by being Indigenous or being international, who are we hoping to welcome in through the doors? And I feel like I hear a split conversation of certain pastors advocating, if you're foreign or international, that's a great calling card. People are interested, so they'll just come because you look different. On the other hand, I've also heard pastors say, if we have too much foreignness, people will feel uncomfortable and Japanese people won't come. And so I've heard both very different opinions being voiced by Japanese pastors at the same time. And I think likely, especially if we're talking about non-Christians, they're not going to be attracted to the exact same model. And so even apart from finance and support and everything, I think part of the conversation is, who do we hope to be able to reach? And if it's different, we're actually probably doing better because we have different people who are going to come to either of those options.
And I think another area kind of that actually it might be helpful to parse this out that I've been reflecting on is, I think there may be three categories. There's kind of the indigenous category. There's three categories in my mind, and this needs to be reformed. But there's there's the Japanese, there's the international engaged in the English world, and then there's the international engaged in the non-English world. And I think that in my reactions to questions and ideas in this area, I have a much more open-handed, curious approach to the English world than I do about the non-English world. And I don't want you guys to think but I just there's a different approach and response that I see in myself that I feel like I need to reflect on, and that I think I perceive in the churches and people around me.
One more question? Anyone?
I think one of the things that I'm hearing as well is missionaries who look different. How are you guys dealing in your organizations with missionaries that don't look different, and how are they engaging with this ministering to internationals versus Japanese and that type of thing? You could comment on that.
Yeah. So I'm the area leader, and underneath me are our team leaders, and they're the ones who are on the ground doing church planting. And every single one of our team leaders is either Asian American or they're Caucasians married to Japanese. And so for at least one of those spouses, they're constantly invisible as being different to the rest of society here. And that's been interesting to think through because for many of them, like being here also has that identity issue. Who am I? Especially if I'm an invisible minority. And so I think each person responds to that. And I'm going to say they also respond to it differently depending on how long they've been in Japan. For some people, obviously, it can be comforting not to be noticed so much. For others, it's frustrating because there's a lot of expectations that are being thrown at them. But they're like, I just arrived in Japan. I shouldn't have to be expected to know Japanese immediately. So I shouldn't speak too loudly because I do have another Pioneers worker here with us, so you can pick their brain as well. But I think even if we can't totally identify with people, we want to have the posture of empathy. Like maybe I don't understand entirely what you have to go through, but I'm going to trust that there's difficult elements of that as well, even if there's also really positive things with it. So just giving an opportunity and space for people to share their stories and let them talk about what they're going through.
So yeah, it's a really good question. I think about some of our Chinese background country sort of church planters and team members. The cultural gap looks very different, but it's sometimes easier to bridge. And I can think of maybe a particular situation where somebody's gone in just their basic cultural understanding of how the church functions with a kind of more hierarchical leadership and what their role within that structure is just instinctively much stronger than a Western missionary who's gone in very similar timing and is really struggling with it. So, but I think also then the networks that they bring in terms of how they're already connected into some of these international communities that are non-English speaking, but Chinese speaking, Korean speaking, and the richness that brings to their experience, their understanding, and then the relationships they can pull into their work and is also very different. I think this is a slightly off topic, but I'm just as an organization, we're wrestling as well with being increasingly multicultural and how do we live that out better. And I think one of the concepts I've come across that's been challenging me recently is this idea that there's a cultural humility that comes from the gospel. That when we talk about like Ephesians and breaking down the dividing wall and that our understanding of our sinfulness also should then lead to a cultural humility, which says, well, my cultural understanding is also flawed and sinful. And so I need to come with curiosity, I need to come with humility, the kind of things that Stephanie was talking about, but that's driven by the gospel and that gives us hope. And I guess that's something which I think really needs to come into this discussion, because when we clash, it's actually, maybe that's pointing to something in our lack of Christ-likeness and not just a cultural issue, but actually that the gospel does something to culture and that we need to think about that.
All right. Well, we're going to move from the discussion of missionaries and ministry to foreign residents to talking about the international/bilingual church and foreign residents. So one of the developments that's taken place in the last, 10, 15 years in Japan has been a real increase in the number of international bilingual churches. And I've been part of one of these churches myself, and I've also been in a more traditional Japanese church. And so there are some distinctives that I think are really important to notice. And when I was learning that the Japanese church was beginning to discuss more about this issue of how to minister to foreign residents and how to think about foreign residents, my first thought was, well, there's a group of people that are doing that a whole lot already. And so anyways, we wanted to give a chance just to hear from just two representatives. So with me today, I'm gonna let these guys introduce themselves, but we have pastors of two different international and bilingual churches. Sama Sensei, do you say international church at Grace Harbor or just bilingual church? No distinction. Okay, got it. So anyways, we'll go ahead and kick off by having these guys introduce themselves.
My name is Jay Greer. I serve with a church that is here in Tokyo. We meet in Harajuku right now. And it's called Mustard Seed Christian Church. Been in Japan for 16 years now, doing some church planting and learning as we go.
My name is Sema Aoyagi, planting church in Toyosu, Tsukishima area, so-called like a Tokyo Bay area with a lot of high rises, new people moving to that area. Our central regentrification happening, using the shopping mall to have a worship service. We are 9 years into the church right now.
Can you guys actually share a microphone? I think that one's dead. It's not working very well. Thank you very much. Yeah. Share the brotherhood of Christ. Awesome. Thank you guys. So tell me about your churches as it relates to foreign residents. Do you have foreign residents at your church? Do you mean to have foreign residents at your church? Are you happy that you have foreign residents at your church? What is your experience like?
Yeah, we have a Gaikokujin foreign residents attending our church. About 40% is the ratio of the non-Japanese speaking people, representing like a 10 nationalities: Chinese, Singapore, Australian, Vietnamese, American, British, Brazil, German, Puerto Rican, Kenya. So variety of people coming from different parts of the world.
We also have foreign residents. I am one of them, in case you guys didn't notice yet. I'm not Japanese. So we have a great variety of people coming through. You're asking earlier, we don't use the word international. We do say we're a bilingual church, but mostly we're just trying to focus mostly on the gospel, trying to make sure that we're putting Jesus front and center in what we do. Our breakdown, counting is really difficult because as you start to count who's Japanese and who's not, you start to ask, is it blood? Is it the passport? Is it culture of where you grew up? Or if you're half Japanese. So counting is really tricky. We'll say that. However, I'm actually part of a small network of a few churches in Japan, and it is kind of church to church, the average being about 50% Japanese, 50% Iroiro. But that could be different. Our church in Kobe and our church in Sendai have a higher percentage of Japanese people. We in Tokyo have a lower percentage. I would say probably 40% Japanese, 60% foreigners from all over the place. An anecdote of this was about, it was sometime last month. In an effort to see people come back after Christmas, we advertised an international potluck. We said, bring a food from your home country or hometown. And we had a lot of food from all over the world, but we regularly have 6 continents represented. But in that way, what we're trying to do is show that we're celebrating the diversity that's there in the body of Christ.
Thank you. And Jay, do you mind sharing a little bit about Mustard Seed Network, which you're part of as well?
Yeah, like I said, a small network of churches in urban Japan. The elevator version of this is we're trying to do church planting with a focus on reaching the 99% with the gospel. As much as we possibly can, trying to share the good news with people who haven't heard it. And we've been around for 14 years now, starting in the city of Nagoya.
When you say 99, yeah, that's the best place you could possibly.
It's a great spot.
Yeah. When you say 99%, who are the
99% lost people in Japan. Lost people in Japan. So
lost people?
Lost people in Japan. That's a good clarifier. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, that's what we're doing today. So when you guys first sensed the call to ministry and were thinking, maybe I'm going to be a pastor, or maybe I'm going to serve the Lord, did you imagine that a kind of large focus of your church, a large focus of your kind of journey to Japan, and Sama Sensei, serving as a pastor in Japan, was going to include ministering to foreign residents? Like, was that something that was part of your idea early on, or is it something that came to you later?
Well, yes and no. You know, we are called to this area of the Tokyo waterfront. So to be a salt and light in that area, we definitely need to make the Japanese as the primary focus because that's when the majority of the people who live over there. But at the same time, there are a good number of the foreigners, non-Japanese, working, studying in the area. I think it's about less than 10%, 6 to 7, 8%. That's so you need to see how we could also be a blessing for that people. Not so much, well, probably for the missional, not so much of the missional focus, but you know, um, as the representation of the gospel embodiment, we need to always be attentively caring for the minorities. The scripture verse that came to my mind is Leviticus 19, verse 33. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So how you treat them, how you see them, really shows what the gospel is for you. So we want to be also welcoming for those non-Japanese people. So
That's great. Thank you.
That's such good stuff. When you ask, this question is interesting because when you ask like what we were thinking when we first moved here, we were thinking very little. I was just marked by extreme ignorance, and so trying to figure things out. Plenty of passion. So yeah, we really had no idea what we were doing in terms of, we had a plan. You can make a plan in America. When you come, then you change your plan. So it's a very different look than what we had. How we got to where we are now, honestly, came through the Word of God and repentance for us. So all of these things come down to stories. There was a time planting in Nogwe where we were very new, and we noticed that as people are coming, you're really reaching out to someone and making sure, oh my goodness, here's a Japanese businessman. How are you doing? It's great to see you. Let's meet you here. Would you like to sit here? This is really great. And then we noticed at one of our staff meetings, it's like 4 or 5 weeks, a woman named Vivian had been coming, kind of saying, has anyone reached out to Vivian? And kind of everyone was saying, no, I don't think so. Okay, well, come to find out, she's half Japanese. She speaks Japanese. She's half Brazilian, but her name's Vivian, and she doesn't look Japanese. And so we realized this woman has come into church because she wants to hear the gospel, fully loved by God. And we had not reached out to her, and James 2 just cut us to the heart. Where we're realizing we have committed the sin of partiality. Because this woman did not decide who her parents would be. And we then followed up with her, and she's saying, I'm coming to church because I want to know about God. We're saying, wow, did we mess up here? We have to reach out to this woman and share the gospel with her in Nihongo. This is her language. And so there was a moment of huge repentance for us where we said, we are going to share the good news with every single person that God brings into our orbit. It just so happens if you do ministry in this orbit, the 99%, a ton of them are Japanese. So you're going to reach a ton of Japanese people. But that's one of the ways that we wound up doing church the way that we're doing it.
Yeah, thank you. Tell me about bilingual church. What is it like? Why do you do it? How is it kind of strategic or helpful? Or tell me more about bilingual church.
we do bilingual church with the primary Japanese being the first language. It's not difficult as I'm a Japanese pastor. So although I understand and speak in English, but I don't speak English much at my church. So, but at the same time, bilingual church as a bilingual church, we make every Japanese to be translated into English. So the worship service is side by side. I speak, and then the translator speaks as well. So that's how we present how we do the bilingual church. And the reason why we do this is because simply because we want to be a blessing for the non-Japanese people, and but and also I think two more reasons is that we know that the future of the church will be the cross cultural. If you read Revelations, that's the multiple languages, people to get together and worship together. So that's a that's the layout of the global kingdom in God's vision. So we want to, let the people to have the foretaste of it. So that's another reason. Probably third is in our area, the majority of Japanese still also has some interest into the cross-culture experience. So that's the major reason that we do.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have, it's worth saying we have a big DNA document of how we do church. One of the things not written in our DNA document is the word bilingual. We recognize that that is helpful right now, but I don't know if it was helpful 50 years ago. I don't know if it's going to be helpful 50 years from now. And also, we're in large cities, so we see that there is something very helpful about this. I could get conspiracy theorists really excited to say, who knows what Google has figured out for us with language in 10 years from now, or AI's got it all cracked, or whatever. But for right now, we need to have translation to be able to have a diverse, beautiful community. It's very helpful. I think everyone here wants to reach Japanese people. That's not the question. It's how. And with more and more international families, with more and more international marriages, and just the numbers, if you look at all the numbers on the rapid diversification of Japan, we have to have some mechanism that's in place. Now, I would encourage people, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but I would encourage people that if they're thinking of how do I engage with the multicultural world in Japan, the answer is not necessarily bilingual. I've been to churches with, and this was mentioned an hour ago, but churches that are all Nihongo, but if you look, it's 50% Japanese and 50% a mix of various foreigners. And so it's really, you're wanting to make the gospel the center, and then there's decisions you'll make about your liturgy, about your worship, that will influence, who finds this to be accessible. But it has a lot of, bilingual church has a lot of work. When you talk about literally doubling everything, it's literally doubling everything. And so to do it well takes a lot of work. But I think the payoff, some of what Sam is mentioning, of getting to worship with so many different kinds of people is a beautiful foretaste of the kingdom in heaven.
Yeah, thank you. Both of you guys mentioned bilingual church with reference to outreach to Japanese people. So you're adding English to try to reach Japanese people who maybe don't speak English or don't speak English well. Can you explain the kind of philosophy of that? Like, how does that work, or how is that strategic for potentially reaching Japanese people?
Yeah, I think like has been mentioned, I think there's a lot of people that are interested in English. It's hard for me as an American to identify with that. We don't have a language that if we feel like, oh, if I just knew this language, so many doors would swing open for me. But that is how a lot of people in Japan feel. That's how a lot of people around the world feel. And so I remember talking with one of our Japanese teammates in Osaka and saying, hey, I'm thinking we should start an outreach event that's all Nihongo. Wouldn't that be cool? And he's like, why in the world would you want to do that? And I thought you would be excited about this. And he said, no. For Japanese people to go to church, they need an iwake. And I thought, okay, what do you mean by this? But he's saying, like, no Japanese person who is not a Christian is going to show up to church saying, I just really have a hole in my heart, or I'm seeking God, or I want to know the purpose of life, and so I'm just trying to understand spiritual stuff.
Very few people are in that category. If I have some iwake, some kind of excuse to say, I'm just here for the English, actually, really, I'm depressed and I'm trying to find the meaning of life. At least they can say, this is why I'm here, and allows them to save face. This was what he was telling me. And I thought, that's actually pretty smart. So we ended up starting another bilingual outreach on Wednesday nights, is how that got there. So I think there is a pocket of Japan that is very interested in all things international and bilingual. I think if we look around at a lot of corporations, I don't think Apple, Starbucks, Disney, these things are not trying to figure out how to do this. McDonald's, I don't know. There's a lot of things that are international in Japan that are incredibly successful. The other thing is asking the question, what is the very best favor that we could give to the future of the Japanese church? How do we set them up for the brightest gospel-centered future out there? And I think making sure that we are creating churches where all people are welcomed and all people are loved, and we are saying our number one identity is in Christ and not our bloodline when we create that kind of church, I think that's the best favor that we can give to the future of Japan with the way that things are going.
How is bilingual church helpful for reaching Japanese?
Yes. Our church doesn't have like an English Bible study or English learning.
No eikaiwa.
No eikaiwa. We don't have eikaiwa at all.
How can you be a real church without?
That's what we're trying to be. Yeah. But at the same time, I think just providing worship service in 2 languages make the church welcoming place for the non-Japanese people. And I think a lot of Japanese people, we also have a good number of non-Christians. I think they come simply enjoying this kind of international flavor, even though some of those non-Japanese people doesn't speak English. And very little of Japanese, but just being in that kind of international flavor, I think helps the kind of bar down for non-Japanese people to come. And also, I think also just cross-cultural experience, like Chinese people had a gyoza, a dumpling party, and invited us and non-Christian Japanese as well, and we had a very good time, cross-cultural experience. Another thing is like as we are now we have a prayer focus praying for that our church to be a blessing for the non-Japanese residents or sojourners in our area. I think people have more eyes and compassion for those who are potentially kind of struggling living in Japan, try to learn Japanese and try to live their life up. Some of us are talking about the kind of potential of doing like a JSL, Japanese as a second language kind of ministry. And for that kind of venue, non-Christian Japanese also are interested in. I want to help, if there's any way that I could be a help. So I think, like any mercy ministry could be a venue to bring non-Christian Japanese into it. So like this, how church could be a blessing for the foreigners who are new to Japan, opens up the door for the non-Christian Japanese to be also feeling like they want to be a part of it.
That's great. Thank you, Sam. Are there any challenges to pastoring a multicultural church, especially bilingually? Any challenges specifically about pastoring foreign residents in Japan?
I feel like how we shepherd those non-Japanese people are through just providing bilingual service, and that's kind of a very minimum way of serving. So I feel bad that I'm not being able to provide much opportunity for for non-Japanese speaking people to feel nurtured, trained, equipped. So that's as a pastor, I feel bad.
Do you feel like you do that better for the Japanese congregation?
I do I do most of those energy pouring out to the Japanese. So this is this is a training, but I'm sorry, this is only for Japanese. I have many occasions that I have to say that way. So so I feel bad that I'm not be shepherding well. And also because of that, I feel a little bit of still not doing my job to equip those non-Japanese people to be a missionary to their Japanese co-workers enough. So
Thanks.
Challenges, so we're saying
Yeah.
challenges. Yeah, I think we've had challenges in a diverse church since Acts chapter 6, and it's been really, really tricky where you have people with multilingual backgrounds coming together and you're trying to say, how do we care for everyone equally? That was a struggle. Hey, our Greek speaking widows aren't getting any food. How do we have to put extra effort. Let's appoint these guys to help these people out. And apparently the problem persisted because we see it pop up again in Galatians and Ephesians and Romans. And so we know that having an all nations church is difficult, has been difficult, will be difficult. Making sure that we're making things available to everyone is hard. We're also getting people who come with another language that is their main language, their heart language. So we have more and more people at our church right now who are Chinese, but are tuning into the sermon either in English or in Japanese. Some in all three, with a fourth to spare. But how do we care for those people? I'm having to lean on more people and say, hey, could you help me out? This person really needs I think they need a study Bible. Can you help me find a Chinese study Bible? These kinds of things where I'm needing to lean on others in the church to help care for, making sure there's someone in the church. Doesn't necessarily need to be me. I would love to help any way I can, but how are we making sure you can have some kind of soul care, some kind of shepherding from someone in the church, regardless of your main linguistic background?
You guys think that kind of bilingual ministry or bilingual church is a magic bullet for reaching Japan or reaching Japanese people?
No.
no.
Okay, good. I didn't assume you did, but I thought it might be helpful to state that. I know that's a question a lot of people have. This may be the last we have time for. So if there's a Japanese pastor and due to changing demographics, there's more foreign residents that are in his neighborhood and they are now coming to his church. He's got more foreign residents coming to his church. And he said, you guys pastor, churches that are more international than my church, but my church is starting to become like that a little bit. How do I do this? What advice would you give? How would you recommend he approach that challenge?
Probably depends on what kind of foreigners are there. But assuming there are more Southeast Asians, and if that's the case, there are a lot for the Japanese church. The more indigenous the church is, that is such a jewel for those non-Japanese people who are new to Japan. They want to be welcomed. They want to have friendship, fellowship with the Japanese local people, and the church could be a place that where those new to Japan to feel welcomed and have enjoy the safe place. So I think even this a small thing, I could just open up the church building for just small amount of time per week and inviting those non-Japanese people, and that would be a huge blessing. Maybe just kind of start small, how we could be a blessing for those who people live in the neighborhood.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we could have a really long discussion on minutia, little bitty details on how to do those things well at church, but try to go big picture a little bit. I would first say to try to make sure that the identity of your church remains, we're all about Jesus, we're all about the gospel. Once you make the identity of your church either international, foreign, bilingual, make sure that the number one thing is we're talking about your creator who loves you. That's what you're here for. The next piece is, I would say, to try your best to not apologize for diversity. The more that you do, the more awkward it becomes. If you think about doing that in a different context, it's unthinkable. A pastor in Chicago saying, "Hey, I'm really sorry about all the various ethnicities we have here today. I hope you all like our church." It's unthinkable. This guy is canceled. It's gone. Forget. It's a terrible idea. Let's not apologize for that. Let's show we really care about everyone. A gospel transformed heart will care and love will love everyone, and therefore you get to celebrate all kinds of things. You are wanting to reach people in Japan. If you have 50 foreigners come in, you just had 50 evangelists. Romans 1:16 says the gospel is the power unto salvation. It doesn't matter whose mouth it's in. Equip those people to go and take that good news to lost people in Japan.
Okay, sorry, I have one more. So let's say a missionary kind of, approaches you and they have a question. They say, why should we even bother ministering to foreign residents? Like, I came here to reach Japanese people. Why should I include this as part of my focus when I'm already kind of feeling busy? Not that you're going to force them to do it, but
Do you have an answer? Because I got to think about it.
I don't know. I think I said this, but I think the how you care for those people who are in your neighbor as even though it's the minority, it really shows what the gospel is. So that's I think that's very crucial. It's not so much of your kind of a success or effort being paid, but more like it really shows what you believe. So and Jesus said, who become the neighbors. And in your neighbors, if you have the non-Japanese people there, you need to find a way. You need to start praying how you could be a blessing for them.
Eloquent and wonderful. Thank you. Because I think this is just so wonderful to hear this coming from Sema. And it's an interesting question. You've created a straw man for me here, so I'll try to be nice to him. But I really do feel that's kind of it's a missionary specific question. I don't know if the lost people that I'm trying to reach in Japan are thinking about that. And so the more focused we are on the 99%, I think that question kind of fades into the background. I think they would feel oddly targeted if I said, I moved here to try to want to tell only you Japanese people about the gospel. I think that feels odd to non-Christian Japanese people who have never picked up a missiology book or anything like that. Now, obviously, there's good things to discuss and things that we need to think about. This is not simple. Who said it's complex? They are correct. However, I think that the people we're trying to reach think about this very, very differently.
Thank you, Jay. That's really good. Okay, we want to open the floor now for some Q&A, and I'm going to see if one of these mics over here is charged up so it's working better than this one that's totally dead. And I'm just holding it because it's symbolic.
So I imagine like your churches are really attractive to people who've lived overseas or have like some exposure to international culture. Do you get any Japanese people who have no like kind of interest in or kind of no, like they can't speak English, they've no exposure to overseas? And if so, like what kind of proportion?
I think he might have a different answer because just by virtue of the fact that I'm leading the church, many of those people won't be there. And I think that's wonderful if they go to a different church. And we need a diversity of churches to reach a very, very diverse population. Once again, I just have stories. There's a woman who came to our church in Osaka, heard the gospel. We walked her through the gospel. She believed, she was baptized, she started growing. I think 6 to 8 months she was in our church plant. And then she came to me, I could tell she was nervous, and she said, I've been thinking and I really would like a Japanese pastor, and so I think I might have to move churches. I said, that's wonderful. Where do you live? She told me. I was like, I know a great church down there. Let me contact, I'll introduce you. All church plants should want to raise all boats. And when we have those people, that's wonderful. Okay, how do we now, uh, uh, how do we introduce them? How do we then take them to someone else? I would just love if they come in the door and hear something about Jesus, and then we get them to the church that fits their needs. I think that's great. We might have a different answer.
I try to make the ratio of the non-Japanese people to be below like a 50%. Right now it's about 40%, so that's our kind of ideal size. But there's still people, some Japanese people feel a little bit intimidated by that atmosphere. I have a 70 years old lady attending our church. When she first came, she was a little bit intimidated with that. But at the same time, it's more like an educational process. And now she understands how she could be a blessing for those, young Vietnamese girl who came to Japan, doesn't speak in Japanese, but want to be, have make friends, and how those 80, 70 years old lady could be a good friend to her, really, made her to feel like she could be used. So I think it's a process of relearning, learning the gospel context, how the gospel really break down the walls between us. I think.
Thanks, Simon.
In bilingual churches, when you have the members meetings, how do they relate with each other? For example, when they have to make some decisions, we foreigners think a little bit different. Let's say we make very interesting not decision, but how do you say in English? Oh, I forgot the word. Huh? A point, yes. Let's say a point. How do you deal with the decisions making? Because some Japanese feel a little bit not very comfortable for what we suggest.
I think I as a leader, Japanese leader, I make decision in more like a Japanese way.
Okay.
And any meeting that we do, it's primarily in Japanese. So I think if you speak in Japanese and try to, I think by speaking in Japanese, I think how you talk, how you discuss, become a little bit more Japanese way. So I think so. Um, so of course there are opinions, and we hear those opinions carefully, but we probably make the decision more Japanese way than non-Japanese way.
Yeah, for all of the talk that we give towards the beauty of the diverse church of all nations, we need to also be culturally aware and sensitive. There's yeah, deferring to Japanese people, Japanese culture and customs in Japan does not contradict anything else that we've talked about. So when we're making decisions, to say, hey, this, we might need to talk about this in this way. Some nemawashi might be needed to just kind of talk about this and think about this and roll out this decision in this way. We're still going to do that as best as we possibly can. We have also had many times in our church where we've had to take people aside and say, hey, I'm sorry, but I don't know if you are aware, but that was very culturally insensitive. You're going to need to approach that a different way or do that differently next time. And it could be just a simple opportunity for discipleship for that person who didn't mean to, but stepped on a cultural value.
I think we've been appropriately talking about the interface between the bilingual church and the missionary community, which is really interesting for us. I'm curious, what has your experience been with the broader Japanese church as a bilingual church?
I mean, varied, lots of, yeah, various interactions that have been both very positive and also, I don't want to say negative, but more okay, you're doing your thing over here and they kind of wish us well. And so we're wanting to be as open-handed and collaborate as much as we possibly can. Once again, it comes down to stories for me where I could have really encouraging stories of a few churches that we've been able to network with, and it's been very good. But I would never say it's always only easy. Certainly, it's tricky at times. I think most churches, probably anywhere, though, if you said, "How are things in Springfield, Missouri? How with the other churches?" Some of them really great, and some of them it's not so easy to make inroads. So varied.
I think even though our church background is different, but people hear when I share about a story how the Vietnamese became a Christian, uh, and even through the online, Vietnamese start to attend our online worship service. By invited by his sister who became a Christian in Japan, and how our church is now hiring her as our intern, and so that Vietnamese girl is serving as an intern at a church and try to bring church people to help the retainees in the Baragi area or Shinagawa area. Just seeing those the gospel movement and fruit and how we could be a blessing, how we can reach out to those a lot of non-Japanese speaking people who use gospel. I think the Japanese church kind of feel the touch. They understand the value and they want to be a part of it, and so I think yeah, even though the demographic is different, but when it's clear that we are doing for the gospel, it's that unites us together.
So earlier, the topic of contextualization came up a little bit. So I was just curious with maybe sharing the gospel slightly differently to different background people. When you have a multicultural group that's gathering, how do you handle contextualization when sharing the gospel, as well as when you're trying to equip people to go out and share the gospel with others?
Great question. I'm sure that whatever was said earlier about contextualization is far more eloquent than anything that I will say, but here I go. I think that we are trying to contextualize, and sometimes that means painting with very broad strokes, right? However, I think many good evangelists are not only doing broad strokes, but also are getting to know the individual. So I'm not only figuring out, okay, what country are you from? What language are you from? But okay, you specifically, what kind of person are you? How do you think? How do you reason? Do you have kids? Do you work? What? And you're trying to learn about them. So I think, yeah, the contextualization is not, I think, the question of how do you contextualize to all of Japan? It's like, does all of Japan like baseball? A lot, but you need to get to understand that individual. So people need to do the hard work of getting to know their church. And it could be a very, very diverse church, but most churches around the world are. We're needing to really get to understand these are the people that we have. And I'm not giving you any incredibly insightful answer except to say there's no easy way to do it. I think we have to teach the gospel, and then here's the really hard thing. Now we're teaching people to go and contextualize that to the person in front of them. And that's hard work.
You said well. So, and probably I add a little bit of whenever I preach, I try to be mindful about those people from outside of Japan, and so that they can feel that the gospel is preaching into their context. But it's just a part of the broad stroke. So I need to do more. Well, I hear. Yeah, I agree to you that the best contextualization happens to the more customized way.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. And we're going to go into our table discussions. This will be our last table discussion. So, enjoy it, soak it up, and see you in a few minutes.